We're back after so much tech support and so
And
much
nonsense.
craziness and nonsense. Exactly. Like I know that this Twitch stream together thing is in the beta, which is this is one of the reasons why I don't like betas. But um, this should still not be this convoluted. Like we should really be able to just plug right into OBS, press record, or press start streaming, and keep it moving. It shouldn't be this roundabout nonsense to get all these things in here. But whatever.
Right.
I digress. I can go on a whole rant about that, but that's not why we're here.
Well, I'll just
We're
say
actually
one thing
here.
before you move on. They
Do
need
it.
to be able to connect one OBS to another across the internet. That'll fix everything. The end.
I agree. I agree, and maybe we're the people to do it. Well, I don't know anything about the code or anything like that, but we'll make it happen.
We'll try.
But obviously, we're kind of ripping a bit just to give people a chance to get into it because I don't have my starting soon page set up, any of my screen set up because I'm still trying to figure out this tech stuff first. Um, but let me just let a few people know as we are getting into this thing. But I'm super excited because this is our first actual film conversation. We're actually just going to be chatting today because I beat what's it called, the Star Wars Fallen Order game, and I would be playing Halo right now with my brother, but he's doing that grown up stuff, being in school and taking care of homework and all that jazz, and so I gotta do something else. But Derek was like, "Hey man, why don't we do this live?" And I'm like, you know what? This is a great thing that we should talk about because not a lot of people see this side of it. A lot of people just see, somebody out there with the camera and then they see something on Netflix and they're like, oh, that looks great. But they don't know how it gets there, especially if you don't work in the industry, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So Derek is a phenomenal colorist. I've known him for years and we've worked on a variety of projects. And on every single project, he's like, hey, maybe you should try this to make it a little bit better. And, sure enough, I tried that little thing that he's like, you should try this. And guess what? It makes it a little bit better. And that's the thing about working with, really creative, really talented people because it's going to push you and encourage you to grow. And that's one of the things that I've learned in my 10 or so years of being in film. And so we're going to look at a bunch of different things, bunch of different projects that we've worked on over the few years, from, early on to, more recently and see one, how things have grown and changed, but also, see what was good, what was bad and what needs to change. Right.
Right.
So let's go ahead and get into it and see where we're going to start.
First off, can you hear us both? You can see
Yes.
us, but
Forgot about that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we are coming in live. You can hear our
okay,
sultry
great.
voices like we're on a radio show.
They can hear us both.
Yay! Huzzah! I don't see any chats. Let me bring up my chat stream because I don't see it on my screen here. There we go. Cool. All right, sweet. So
Good,
yeah,
loud
let's
and
get
clear.
into it. So perfect. Love it. So all right, so go ahead and bring up the first one, Derek. So what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to take a look at all these different shots, and I'll give you my perspective as the director, and what it took to get where we are in terms of this particular frame, and then Derek will go into all of the craziness and awesomeness that he's going to do to make it look better. Um, so just to paint the scene, Derek, can you make this full screen?
Yeah, give me a sec.
Cool. Oh yay, I need to learn how to do this. Hey, well that's why we're doing it, because like we hold all the secrets to Hollywood and we're gonna expose them. That's what we're doing. Especially now when that Hollywood is in a strike right now, we're giving away all the stuff. That way everybody can go and do this stuff. Indies for life, right?
Yeah.
Because I haven't used DaVinci in like 3 years. Well, I will say this: Derek really convinced me to stay on the DaVinci Resolve train because it's a phenomenal tool. Just from the free version, you get so much out of that free version. And then when you get to a certain point, to upgrade to the studio version, it opens up even more doors to you as far as what you can do with it. And so I don't want to speak for Derek because he uses it exclusively, so he can talk through all that stuff as he goes through each thing. But just know that I highly recommend Resolve for the stuff that we're going to be talking about today.
And key point,
So
it's free.
It is very free, and it makes keeping Adobe very hard, especially when it can do all the stuff that Adobe can do in terms of like editing and color and sound and all of the above. And even Fusion does like compositing, so that's like the after effects of it. So it is built all into one program, and so I'm very much an Adobe fan, and so I haven't switched yet. But I'm also paying $55 a month, and I'm like, for what? Because Resolve does all the things. But I've used Adobe since like CS2, and so it's hard for me to change. I'm stubborn like that. But yeah, if you don't have anything right now and you have a very limited budget, or you just don't like paying for stuff, go for Resolve because it's a
you
great tool.
you can do everything up to 4K resolution, and it is smooth as butter on almost any system.
Yeah, it really is, except for mine, because every time I try to open a program, I mean a project that you sent to me, it crashed. But that's another topic. We're gonna have to upgrade my stuff because
I've never had
I'm
the problems
I'm
you've had, man.
man, I'm running with a dinosaur right now. I got to fix this.
Dinosaur or Black
But yeah,
Voodoo in there somewhere.
absolutely. There's something in here causing it to be all kind of crazy. But let's get into it. So, what the scene that you're looking at here is from a project called Finding You. And so, essentially, what is happening is you have Junior, who is played by Jason, the man on the left. He is in a very uh, difficult place in his life. His girlfriend of many years has left him because he couldn't get his stuff together. He lost his job because he couldn't get his stuff together. And, the new relationship that he's trying to navigate is, kind of rocky because he doesn't really know how to let go of his previous girlfriend in order to make room for this new woman. And so he's in a very, I don't want to say dark place because he's not like suicidal or anything like that, but he's in a place where he's unsure. And then his counterpart Mitch, who was played by Aaron, he doesn't really know how to help his friend. He's kind of one of those dudes that's like, hey man, I gave you advice, it was great, why are you not fixing yourself? And so he doesn't have a whole lot of patience for them, and so or for his friend right now. And so they're at a point where they're kind of butting heads. And so that's one of the reasons why I framed it this way, where they're kind of head to head. And you can even see that little bit of animosity just in their body language, just in terms of like how Aaron is looking at Jason, and how kind of closed off he is in terms of like the tablet being in front of him, and kind of just having a little bit of a subconscious barrier between the two of them. And those are the little things that a lot of people don't really recognize when they're watching it. But when somebody tells you, it's like, oh, I can see that. And so that's what's happening here. And I also DP'd this shot. So I was working with the camera and also the lighting in addition to directing, and so my brain was both creative and technical at the same time. You know how much I love that. Um, but let me walk you through some of the technical stuff to create this shot. And so you see in the top right corner here, you see that giant wall of light, basically. So there is an overhead light above, basically the door. That's a doorway, and so that light was either off or on. I had no control over it aside from off or on. And so, yep, right where Derek has that power window. And so essentially what was happening is it was too bright initially. Like when I turned it on, it was just blowing the entire scene out. And the mood that I was trying to create, I couldn't expose the what do you call it, the characters properly, and also expose that light properly. And so what I did was I took a plain old white T-shirt and literally taped it around that light, and that
All
did two
gorilla.
things. Yeah, that's all gorilla, because like this was a project that didn't have a whole lot of budget, and so we had to be very strategic on what we shot, but also what gear we got in order to be able to do the stuff that we did. And so it was very like, going back to like, how can we make this work? Let's do it kind of idea. And so, like I said, we put a plain old white T-shirt, taped it on the ceiling around that light, and that did two things. One, it softened the light so it wasn't so harsh, and then two, it brought the exposure down, I think 2 or 3 stops, sorry, which brought the overall exposure into the latitude of what my camera sensor could see. And Derek will explain all of this because I know I'm getting a little technical right now. Um, but when you see the waveform, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about as far as making sure that the camera can see the lights, the brightness, how bright the light can be, but also how dark the shadows can be. Because like you can see right now, like most of Jason's pants, that's just nothing but black. Same with his shirt, because both of them are wearing black. And so this is where production design and styling comes in. I should have been like, hey, do you guys have any other colors besides black? Because you
Yeah.
know, it's just nothing but darkness right there. And so
Dark
we're
navy would
using it
work
to our
too.
advantage. Exactly. It doesn't have to be like gray or white or something like that. It can still be a dark color, but dark is such a exactly what it is. It sucks up all the light.
Yeah.
Yes, let us noobs. Noobs need dummy terms. If either one of us get like too technical or we're getting like too like way up here, just have us Barney style it.
Yep.
Break it down, and we'll let us know. We'll break it down. But yeah, Derek, let's look at the way you get it when you first get
You want to look at
the
the
footage.
logarithmic footage?
I do,
That's
yeah.
that's the
So this
logarithmic.
So this is what the camera sees, and so I'm going to hand it over to Derek, and he can talk us through what his process is to get it to a usable image.
Perfect. All right. So typically, this is what I get when a new project comes to me. It's going to be what we call logarithmic in log. All that means is that the way the camera sees light is in a straight line from dark to bright. And what this does is it adds a mathematical equation that gives us a lot of detail in the shadows and highlights without sacrificing anything. So to get it away from this and get to a beautiful image, we have to apply a log transformation to it. So I'm going to disable some nodes here. In DaVinci Resolve, it is really easy. And let me share my screen here so you guys can see what I'm doing. Here we go. So real simply, I'm going to break down the screen real quick. Right here, we have a bunch of what we call nodes. This would be considered like layers in Photoshop. Most people are familiar with Photoshop, so if you stack a layer on top of each other, it affects the layer beneath it. The same thing here, we read it left to right. And then down here in the bottom left, we have the control wheels that is going to affect how our brightness and shadows are, if we want to tint them to one color or another, we want to raise them or lower them, make them brighter or darker, we can do that. So basically, that's how the program works. We have these effects that we can apply, which help us get from, like I said, logarithmic footage that looks like this into a working color space, which then we can go out to our visuals, out to television or feature film, or if you're on the silver screen. So I'm going to disable this one here. So this is getting us closer. I just added the transfer nodes to get us from log into our working color space, and then from our working color space into our visual for television. Which, if you want to know those exact terms, it's the color space is Rec 709. The gamma value is 2.4, which is just tells the program or the monitor how to adjust the curve to view the light that comes through. Too technical?
And let me hop. It might be, but
Yeah.
that's just part of the job, right?
Yeah.
But just one of the things that I wanted to say to that, as far as like Rec 709 and all the different things and stuff like that. Rec 709 on your monitor is going to look different than Rec 709 on my monitor, and that's one of the challenges of um, color grading and getting an image that looks good across a multitude of devices.
Yeah.
Um, and so, what's really important before you do any of this stuff is to have a color accurate monitor. One of the things that I personally have had an issue with is it looks great on my monitor, but then I export it and then it looks like trash on my iPhone, or it looks like trash on my big TV up in the living room. And it's because I'm using the color profile of this monitor, but that's not really a universal one. And
Right.
so having a monitor that is color calibrated, that's super key. I'm looking over here. I apologize. So let me look in the other camera. But having a monitor that is color calibrated is crucial in order to make sure that what you see is 90% of what you're going to get. It's never going to be 100% accurate because, again, all these different devices interpret color differently. But as long as you have this foundation that is that is calibrated that looks great, you can guarantee that everything else will look
Right.
great in some respect.
I'm going to say this, walk into a Best Buy, your local Best Buy, and just go to the TV section. You look at the content that's the same on the back wall. Not every TV looks the same.
Nope.
So you need something that you know for sure this is how it's supposed to look.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to be tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, and you're never going to get done because it's going to look great on one, and then you tweak for
Yeah.
another one, and so on and so forth. And it's just,
Right. What's red on one might be orange on another,
yeah. A good
unfortunately.
example of that. Yeah, a good example of that. There was a project that we did last year, Derek. Remember Lima One, where I
Yes.
kept on saying it looks too blue, it looks too blue, or whatever. And you're like, it looks fine on my monitor. What are you talking about? And the issue was you had a color calibrated computer or a monitor, and mine was, this one that I need to get rid of. And and so it was just, causing us to go back and forth. But that's time and money,
Right.
because you got to spend time to, tweak what I'm saying, and you're like, but I'm fixing it, and I'm still saying it's
Right.
wrong. You know
I'm
what I
trying
mean?
to
So
fix it, but also not go too far one direction that it looks weird on mine
right,
now.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And
So our
you and I just took a trip, didn't we?
yeah,
Yeah.
we did. We actually went to Flanders up in Atlanta, Alpharetta, which is
For
an hour north of.
which, for those
Go
who
ahead.
don't know, Flanders Scientific is one of the top three, I think,
Hmm.
professional grading monitors for film and
Yep,
television companies.
yep. So if you have a little bit of money, go to Flanders and get a dope monitor.
Yeah,
That's all I'm gonna
yeah.
say.
I think you need a little more than a little, but yeah, at least from the price he quoted us.
You stupid, Dre. Alpharetta is the most country sounding name. I don't know. I think Tuscaloosa beats the Alpharetta, but it's pretty close.
Uh-huh. How about Albuquerque though? That Albuquerque.
Yeah, Albuquerque's pretty bad. And I apologize to anybody that lives in these cities. We're just poking fun. We love
Yeah.
you all. All right, let's keep going.
All right. So basically, from a colorist perspective, we get to this point where we have our working image that we're going to start our process from. But we need to talk to either the director of photography or sometimes the DP or the creative director, whoever has the final say on what the film looks like. And we have to take that input combined with what we know what that the story is and the emotions in the scene, and we have to start making color decisions based on all that input. And so, Ty, you said that he's in a dark spot, right? He's having
Right.
trouble.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah.
And so these are conversations that we have long before Derek gets the footage. That way, when he gets it, he has an idea of what he needs to do to make that happen.
Right.
I will say that bringing a colorist on earlier in the process is better than waiting until everything has been shot, because by then it's too late. And so you want to have these conversations about, like how we mentioned, for example, hey, don't put him in black, put him in navy blue. Those are conversations that we can have with him, and also our production designer and wardrobe stylist, to make sure that the whole picture works together. And that's one of the things personally that did I freeze?
You froze. You totally froze.
Oh geez. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm back.
That's weird.
Okay.
I was going to try to put you up,
What was
but
No, no, you're fine. You're fine.
bringing the
What was
colors
I
on
saying?
earlier, having these
Yes.
conversations.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I personally didn't do in any of these projects. And so one of the things that Derek told me is like, hey, why are you waiting until the very end?
Well, what was
Come and
it?
talk to me sooner.
What was it? You and I worked last year on a couple of times. You brought me on kind of early on to create a look for a project you were working
Hmm.
on. And that's one
Yeah.
that's one of the advantages too, is you don't have to have the colorist on for the entire process pre-production, but you could say,
Hmm.
"Hey, we did a little test shoot. We want it to look this way. Can you create us a lookup table, which is a file that goes in the camera, so you can kind of get an idea of what your final look will be for the film."
Uh-oh, I have run out of system memory. How is that possible? I don't even have anything open.
You're still going. Oh, you froze again.
Okay. All right. Um, Let me close this. This is so wild. I don't have anything open. I apologize, gang. It's definitely me having issues. So why don't I do this? I will change my camera source.
Well, while
Oh,
you work that out, I'm gonna keep going here.
yeah. Do you
Um,
think?
all right, so one of the more advanced things is to have a colorist be on board, from pre-production all the way to production and post-production. That's the more advanced way to do it. The colorist is constantly creating new color lookup tables for the camera between based on the scenes and what the DP and the director want. And I've even read a couple of interviews where by the time they got to where they needed to finish the film, color is one of the last things you do before you actually distribute it. And basically, all the colorist had to do was change a little bit of exposure and a little bit of white balance, but the look was already done, weeks and months in advance. So, with this shot, what we want to do, I think since he's in a dark spot. Um, what we want to do, it's pretty dark right now. It's a little too dark. I'm gonna decrease for the contrast, which is just a little bit, like the mid tones will come up a little bit. You can see that coming on and off there. Um, just to draw the viewer's eye away from the doorway on the right, because we want to focus on them. I'm gonna add a filter here. Sorry, a power window here. What this does is it isolates where you're affecting the image. So now that I've got this in here, I'm going to go to my primaries wheels, and I'm just going to take the gain down a little bit. So it's not really affecting our view too much, not doing too much to the light either. So we tick that on and off. Now instead of kind of being drawn to the right side of frame, now we're focused a little more on the center. We have all that detail because Ty, thankfully, had a white shirt to put on there, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Um, one of the other things, do you want to do a film emulation on this or no?
I think so. That's definitely an aesthetic choice. But that's definitely me. I put a film emulation on everything, and so
A
I kind
lot
of want to see what it looks like.
a lot of people like to do that because film is what we started with and digital is a whole
Hmm.
new world. But we like what we know. So I'm going to just put a lookup table right in here, and that's going to change the
Yeah,
colors around.
and it adds a gritty. I don't want to say gritty, but like a visceral kind of feeling onto this footage as opposed to just being super clean with the digital. Because like I don't want it to look like a videography kind of project. I want it to look like a thing that we've crafted and we've spent time to really develop and everything like that.
Yeah. Um, I totally agree with you because a lot of films that come across, they want something like just get me to Rec 709, make it look pretty. That's basically the note I get a lot is make it look pretty.
Hmm.
It's kind of annoying because what is pretty to you is not pretty to someone else, right?
Right.
Um,
And so I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you up, but
you
Reaper,
good?
this will you'll appreciate this. All of us kind of have to be like a doctor, kind of diagnosing what did this person actually mean. You're asking a buttload of questions to really get an idea of what the problem is and how to fix it. And that way you know how to fix it rather.
Right. So where the problem areas here is, uh, our main character on the left is way too dark without. You can't hardly see anything in his skin on his bicep there. Now we bring it out. We can. I'm just going to sculpt this a little bit further. I'm going to add a matte node here so we kind of lose it off of this back wall. And we can feather that out a bit. He kind of glows a little bit, so I'm going to take that, kind of expand it a little bit. It didn't do... like it did enough. Now it seems more balanced, don't you think? From
Yeah.
that to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't do much more on this shot here. What are your thoughts?
Can you make it full screen for me?
Yeah, sorry.
So personally, I think that we can lower the thing that you just did to bring some of that shadow on Jason down a bit because it feels a little um, artificial to me.
Okay.
Yeah, that feels good right in there.
Okay.
Cool. And so, as you can see, this is very much a push and pull, give and take kind of conversation, kind of collaboration. Um, because we both see things differently and we both have certain goals that we're trying to achieve. And so obviously, if I were to like, hey Derek, can you just smash it all the way down to the blacks? I just want to crush the blacks. Derek would be like,
Okay.
does that really look good though?
Let's do it.
you know yeah, if I were to be like, yo, that's the shot, that's what I was going for, nice and moody and stuff like that, I'm sure Derek would be like, you tripping, buddy, stop that
People
nonsense.
people watching it during the day wouldn't be able to see much.
Right.
Cool.
but yeah, that feels nice.
Yeah. I like where the skin tones are. I didn't have to do much there. The white balance was pretty much spot on for it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yay.
But now comes the tricky part. Does it match?
Yeah. And that was one of the biggest challenges. So let me just walk you through this particular scene, what was different from the previous one. So the first thing is you can notice the Austin 316 is very much illuminated because Aaron has a tablet. He's watching like wrestling or something like that. And so we literally have an iPad on his lap and we're using that to illuminate him. The problem was the illumination from the iPad wasn't nearly bright enough to get his skin tone where I personally wanted it, where I was trying to get it in terms of um, the waveform. And again, Derek can show you what I'm talking about with that as far as like false color and like where skin tones actually reside on that waveform. And so what I did was I took a little puck light, like it was no bigger than this, and just battery operated, stuck that right on top of the iPad, and then just blasted Aaron with some light. And so, excuse me, that was enough to get him illuminated. So that was the first change, because obviously in the wide shot you would have seen that. And then also the light behind him, it was still too bright for me because for me my eyes going to this doorway as opposed to Aaron, and so I had to add another white shirt on top of that to bring it down even more. Excuse me. So those are the two biggest things. And then also I had to turn off the light that was on Jason. You can see him, he's mostly in shadow right now, mostly in silhouette. And that's because I had to turn off the light that was behind him because it was hitting Aaron too much and it was hitting too much of Jason. And I didn't have anything to block that light in terms of like flags or, any kind of barn doors or anything like that. And so I just killed it. But again, that changes the lighting in the scene because lighting continuity is a really big thing, making sure that when you go from angle to angle, it still looks like it's part of the same world. So yeah, I'll hand it back over to Derek and we'll talk about how to make it match.
Right. So one of the tough things about this is you got a lot of brightness behind him, which kind of it strains the eye just a little bit to look at his face. For one, if we look at our previous shot here, he is a little underlit compared to his previous shot, which you said you needed to put a light in there anyways to underlight him, and it maybe was just a little too dim still. So we're gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
bring his face up. So let me switch over to the screen. So I'm gonna add a node here, and I'm gonna create a oval just for his face. And what this?
And
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say one thing that we can't show here is um, he would actually add like a tracking onto this window because whenever Aaron moves his face, that's gonna change where this effect is applied. And so we would literally track his head so that whenever he moves, this window would move with him. But these are just still frames that we grabbed instead of the entire clip, so we can't show you that.
Right. So it didn't have to do much here. I decreased the contrast a little bit on it, which gave him kind of evened out his skin, the shadow and the lighter parts. And then in my gain, all I did was bring it up like maybe 10%, a little bit under 10%. It's not doing a whole lot, but if we go back, it fits a lot more now. If you just watch
Mm-hmm.
his face. Now we can go in more detail, and what we can do, which is nice in Resolve, is we can grab a still from our previous shot, and we can actually split screen it so we can see it side by side. Now the other thing is, give me a second here. We can actually pan our reference frame.
Here we go.
Yeah. So looking at it, like one of the things I'm noticing is the light that's on his cheeks in the wide shot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not like you can see on the tip of his nose. It's a little cool. It's a little blue compared to the previous shot. So one thing I'm
Okay.
gonna do while I'm here is I'm gonna take my gain and I'm just gonna warm it just a little. It's not really doing what I want. So what we can do is we can go into another um, part of the primaries controls is called log. And what this does is this allows me to adjust more specifically based on luminance in the frame. So I'm going to start pretty low here, like 0.24, 25. Let's see what that. Okay, so we can see where the orange is. Now I'm gonna bring that upper ring up in the log wheels. So now I'm just you can see how it's going away. I'm just starting to affect only the brightest parts of the image of that section. Eventually I'll get to where I want. So let's see. So now I can warm it up just a little bit. It's not much, but if I go back and forth, see there it's cool there, and I come back, just warms it up just enough. What are your opinion, Ty?
Can you make it full screen?
Yep,
Cool. And then can you off on it for me?
that is on, off,
Okay.
on.
Yeah, definitely on.
Yeah, just kind of it's like I said, it's a lot of it is just it's not doing much, but it's doing just enough. And the key
Right.
thing is to push it further than what you see seem as normal, and then bring it back. Because as you take away, you start to notice things differently, and you'll find that spot where it looks just right. Uh,
Absolutely.
and then the last thing I'm going to do on this shot to make it match is I'm going to tone that light in the back down. We're going to use a tool called a qualifier. And what the qualifier does is allows me to go in and select based on hue, saturation, and luminance. And you can see we can get some. What you're seeing here is it's just showing you what's being selected. So the pixels that are being selected are coming into our view here. And I really only want to deal with the brighter parts of the image, not the darker so much. So I think that's a good spot there. What we can do is, since the foreground is more saturated than the background, we can reduce the saturation. I'll get a screen share here. Reduce the saturation slider here. It's right in the middle of the screen. And so as I come down, you start to see more of it get taken away. It's Saturation is always a really difficult one to work with because it's so finite there. Um, Maybe what we can do is decrease this a little more. We'll use clean black, and then we'll add in a uh, power window here, just on him. Okay, and I'll invert it so that we're using everything outside of it. Alone, make it a little smaller. Try that. Let's see how that works.
And what is the goal of this power window?
The goal of this power window is just to not affect him. We want to affect the background. So it's actually subtracting him from what we're changing. I'm going
Got
to
it.
use the HDR wheels here. I'm going to take the global down just a bit.
Yeah, there we go.
And we need to just always reference our image. So let me get a good spot here for that. Because we want to see this hallway. This is where, if you look in the bottom right here, and I'll make it bigger. That's really big. So this is called a waveform, and what you're seeing is from left to right is the image that we're looking at. So as I affect it, you can see it moves up and down. So the numbers on the left tell you how bright a pixel is. And so we don't want to give them that halo look there. What we can see on the left-hand side of our waveform here, where my cursor is circling, that's actually the reference frame. So you can see the whole reference frame is actually a slight bit lower.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll go back to our first node here, since that's going to be our global effector. We're just going to take the global exposure down. And something about there seems right. Let's see how that affects. He's I don't like how that affects that. So that affects his face. It doesn't seem
Right.
right. Um,
So would you go the opposite way? Would you make the other shot brighter?
you could, but people focus mainly on the faces, right? It's what you're focusing on. So I'm not going to worry
Mm-hmm.
so much about the light in the background, because we're only kind of seeing it in the wide shot, and then we're looking straight on.
Right.
Might actually be perceptively in your brain brighter when you're talking to someone looking at a light behind them.
Mm,
So I'm
got
going to
you.
leave that where it is, but I'm not liking this haloing thing that we're getting around him. He kind of like has a bright cast shadowed around him. So I'm just
Right.
going to change our power window here and soften it up a little more. Right? Just make it really soft. Now you don't really, it's a little more imperceptible, but we brought
Right.
our light, overall light in that hallway down.
Right. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the film emulation and stuff like that, um, I see you're not making any like color changes. Is that a later step, or are you happy with what you're seeing and you're just like, I just need to fix a couple of like exposure kind of things?
I'm really happy with what I'm seeing, unless you or the director or DP tells me that, hey, this light, I actually want this more blue rather than
Mm-hmm.
the warmness here, or I want the whole
Mm-hmm.
scene bluer, to make it feel colder. Then we can start affecting that. So that's
Okay.
I would ask you, like, if you're okay with how this looks, this is where we're going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it looks great. I just, I know that you have, again, your thoughts and stuff like that, and so I just wanted to see if that was just a step that you did later, as you like once you got the exposure locked in, then you started worrying about like shifting colors and that sort of thing, or are you just like, that's,
Just based
I'm
on
happy
what I'm
with this, so I'm
seeing, I'm
just
liking what we got. So
cool.
if you tell me otherwise, I'll make this thing as blue as the iceberg.
Nah, you're fine, man. You're fine.
Cool. I was going to do the full screen again for the audience so that we can see back to
Yeah.
back. So we're going to compare a wide, oh, whoa, whoa, wide shot We're going to compare that to the close-up. I think the last thing I see is maybe the skin tones aren't like as saturated in the close-up.
Okay.
Are you seeing that too?
Switch back. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, so I'm gonna do an actual a specialty node here. So what I can do is I can add a node, and then I can also tell it in this specific node I want to use a different color space or a different log curve or gamma curve. And in this case, I want to change the color space. I don't want to work in the DaVinci wide gamut color space that we've been in. Um, and I'm
Can you switch
doing,
back to your I'm sorry,
oh,
Derek. Can you switch back to your yeah.
yeah, screen share back and forth. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So all I do is right click on the node and I can change the color space, gamma. I can tell which channels there's 3 channels RGB, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
tell I don't want to affect the red, green, or blue. Or in this case, if I change to HSL, which is hue, saturation, and luminance, I don't want to affect the hue. I don't want to affect the luminance. I just want to affect the saturation. And so now if I go to my primaries wheel, if I go to the gain, I can increase the saturation. See? And it doesn't make anything brighter or darker. It just changes the saturation. One of the key things to watch out for, I'm going to create another node here, and I'm just going to show you. If I just use the regular saturation slider on it,
Ugh.
it starts to get weird when we just use the regular
Yeah.
saturation. So a more advanced way is to change your node's color space to hue, saturation, and luminance, and then you're going to use your gain to affect saturation, which is not going to be as intense as using just the saturation slider.
Cool.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And that definitely looks better to me, especially with that light in the background because I couldn't get the exposure of that light exactly where I wanted it. I mean, obviously, it's going to be brighter, just because it is a huge light source behind them.
Yeah,
But excuse me. But in terms of again the overall picture, now it feels like we're containing it, we're controlling it, as opposed to just letting it do whatever it wants to do.
right.
You know.
And just to give an example to the audience, if I disable all of the effectors that we had, this is where we started
Phew.
from.
Wow. That's
It's
incredible.
almost an inversion.
Such, yeah, such a difference.
Yeah,
But this is why it's so important to really dial in all of these different lights and these different exposures in your scene, because you see how much work it took to get here. And imagine you have 300 shots in your movie. You know, colorists are expensive, and so they'll be happy to do this, but you got to pay them, for the hours and days that it's going to take to do
right.
it.
Yeah. And if you, well, to give an example, if you go to a larger house, right? If you go into a post-production house, and you want them to color your film. Typically, they're going to have a senior colorist work on it, and you're going to have an assistant colorist. Well, the senior colorist is going to cost the most. So what you're going to do is
Hmm.
you're going to sit with him through each scene, right? And you and him and the DP or him and the director are going to find the looks of each scene, do also
Hmm.
all the little special things, and then he's going to pass it off to his assistant, which costs a lot less. But the assistant's going to take what the senior colorist did and make sure that it matches each shot for shot,
That's
to do
incredible.
that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
because you don't want to sit there with a client or with a DP for 8 hours a day, and you're sitting there on one shot, and you're making all the different power windows and tracking all the power windows and everything. That's
Hmm.
something that someone else can do. The senior colorist is going to sit there. He's going to make the look with the director, DP, and then he's going to maybe figure out where the power windows need to be and what they need to track to, and he's going to make notes. And then the assistant will do all the tracking and do all the like make sure each shot to shot looks the same.
Nice.
Yeah. So we got one more shot left. I'm
Yep. So let me talk through this one. Can we go through to the first the two shot?
yeah.
So you'll see here he has the that basically a rim light on his back and everything like that. And then go back to the his single.
Yep.
But we had that light behind him, but there should be a light coming from the kitchen as well because those two lights were actually affecting his exposure. The challenge was because yeah, you can see it more so on his like bicep and stuff like that. We don't get any of that in this shot. So you look at his bicep on this two shot, and then you look at his bicep on this one. All of that light is gone, and the reason for that was because, again, same deal with the overhead light, behind Aaron. There was a kitchen light on, but the same deal. It was either on or off. And this time it was one of those or three of those hanging lights that are above like the counter and stuff like that.
Yeah. The
And
pendant
so in this
lights.
case, yeah, the pendant lights. And this time I couldn't put like, anything around it to soften it or anything like that. Cause it just, we didn't have enough shirts for one thing, but also it didn't contain the light as much as it needed to. And so we just decided to kill it. We did have another light that we could have used, but it wasn't strong enough to actually put it into the scene to actually get it close enough to affect Jason, which is crazy because of how tight we are. And so you would think we should be able to put the light right outside of the frame and have it kiss, but it was one of those really small, like really cheap lights. Because again, our budget was limited, and so we're like, let's just lose it and hope nobody notices. I'm pointing it out now because I know how to fix it. I know what it should be, but
right.
sometimes you just got to make it work.
So since we're working on him, we'll take his angle and we want to see him, right?
Yeah,
I'm gonna try to do this one a little quicker. So we're
where'd
just
he go?
he's right
Yeah.
there.
Oh, I see. Got it.
He's
Okay.
still there. Yeah. We want to find a good reference frame and so that you're focusing on what you want to focus on.
I got you.
Looking at it, like the only thing I can really see is maybe taking down the back wall. What are your thoughts
Okay.
here?
I agree. I think there's a little bit of blue in his shadows on the two shot as opposed to this one. Um, but
Okay.
that's really about it. Um, yeah, this one feels a little too orange for me.
I would agree. All right, so let's take a crack at this. Deal with the big issue first, which is this big wall over here, which is kind of in between the two of them. So we'll do a power window again with a qualifier, so that we just get the bright areas. We're gonna soften that. There we go. Okay, and then I'll just take my gain down a little bit. Not much, just a little bit.
Yeah, just enough.
Yep. You said it's too orange, right? Too warm?
A little too warm. Yeah, a little too warm. Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to go to my first node and I'm going to go into HDR wheels. The great thing about HDR wheels when you're talking about color temperature is it kind of puts a anchor at the shadows and the highlights, and it kind of bends the color temperature in the middle. So you don't really seem to lose the black and the highlights. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they stay black and they stay white rather than kind of being tinted some way.
That's cool. I didn't
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah. So what do you think of that there?
Can I see it next to the other one? Because that looks right
Okay,
just on the outset. Yep.
I think that looks a
Mm-hmm.
lot better. Yeah.
I
Um,
agree.
the blue. Is he wearing a blue shirt or is it a black shirt?
If I remember correctly, it's a black shirt.
Okay, I wonder where the blue's coming from. But we can.
Okay, so we can talk about that. So, excuse me, that light that's in the background, that was only a daylight light. And
I see.
so yeah, and so I couldn't control the what's it called, the color temp of that light either. So again, that's one of the limitations of, with budget being at a certain level, it limits some of the creative choices you can make. And so how do you work around that? We could have gotten just a gel, an orange gel, and put that on that light to warm it up a little bit, but we didn't have that. And this is where pre-pro and really planning out the shoot really comes into play. Because if we had more time to do those kind of planning kind of things, we can be like, hey, we're not going to be able to afford the light that we can adjust the color temp, but we can go get some really cheap gels, for like a buck or whatever, how much it costs,
Right.
and tweak that
Right.
on set. But again, those are those planning kind of things, and it's always great to have a planner on your team. We didn't have one. I'm not a planner. I'm a doer.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm here for in case you don't have a planner. So, what we're going to do
Absolutely.
is we're going to use a tool called a color warper. And this is a new tool that came out 2 or 3 versions ago. Um, and what it does is you can create this grid and affect certain areas of the image just by dragging these points around. So I know it has a blue tint to it. I know it's pretty dark, so I'm coming to the blue side and I'm coming down to the darkness area. I don't want to go to the very bottom because that'll start affecting my shadows entirely. But I think this one's a good spot to start. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to move it to the left. Just start moving it around, see what it starts to do. I'm not entirely happy with this point, so just right click
Okay.
it and it resets it. Um, this one might be a tough one, Ty.
Yeah.
Um, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to power window it again, and then we'd have to track this if he was moving. But I'm just going to power window it and go over to my curves, and I'm just going to bring it down a little bit, hopefully without crushing it too much. And the other thing is I can go over to my luminance versus saturation. So the darker an pixel is, the less saturated it's going to be with this tool. And that's in the curves editor. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my dark end and I'm just going to bring it down a bit. And I can see that power window is doing too much here. So I'm going to feather it out. But I'm also going to come over to our keying tab. And this basically tells the computer what's the opacity of this node. I'm just going to reduce it. So comes back maybe 80%, 85%, somewhere in there. It's not doing too much, but it's doing just enough. This was before, and this is after.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of got
Yep.
a little like inverted halo, so I might feather it a little more. But let's take a look at it in full screen. You tell me what you think.
All right.
So that's with it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's without it.
One more time, please.
With it, without it. With it, without it.
Okay. So I like both for different reasons. I like the way his face looks better without, but I like the way his shoulder and his everything else looks with it.
Okay. Well, the face is a little easier to fix, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a node after it, and we're just going to kind of readjust his face back to the way it looked like
Okay.
without it. Um,
Cool.
that's the easier path of the two ways.
Cool.
Yeah.
I dig it.
So get it on his face, feather it out a little bit. And you said, let's try.
Yeah. There we
Yeah,
go.
bring that
Bringing
up a
his
little
face
bit.
back into the world. Hello, face.
I'm gonna bring the contrast down a little bit to kind of bring out the
Okay.
shadow, the darker areas. Kind of smooths his skin tone out a bit. It's like 0.87 maybe. So let's look at what that's doing.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah. But let's always reference our wide shot. So it looks nice, but it
Hmm.
might be just a tad bit too bright. So
A bit too bright. Yeah.
yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my curves editor here, and in the same node, I'm
Can
going
you
to,
switch back to
oh, sorry.
your desktop?
Switch
Thank you.
back to the curves editor here, and in the same node, I'm going to add the default anchors in, so it gives me the anchors across. And I'm just going to bring an anchor here, just kind of bring the, the shadows down, bring the midtones down just a little. Not much,
Nice,
but it kind of brought
but just enough.
brought him back. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And again, it's a different angle, right? Light reflects off your
Hmm.
skin differently in different angles.
Right.
I think that works pretty well right there.
Yeah, I agree. It still matches.
So we've got
Cool,
our
cool, cool,
three
cool,
from
cool.
this scene. So
And then the thing that I like also going back to that two shot, um, they're kind of separated now even more. Can you go back to the two shot?
yep.
Um, yeah. So Aaron has a more warm color light behind him, and now Jason has a more cool light. And again, going back to what we were talking about before about how them being in two different places, that's kind of reinforcing that kind of idea. And it was one of those things where, yeah, you see much warmer there, and then we go to Jason's shot,
Cooler.
that light is much cooler, but it still fits in the whole scene because we have that two shot that we're referencing,
Right.
and so now you can really see how those little tweaks can help to reinforce the story that you're trying to tell. Because now, even though they're on the same in the same shot I'm sorry, in the same scene, they're very distinct in terms of how they look, and I love that.
And it sets the character's mood based on the lighting, right?
Hmm.
They each have a different
Absolutely.
mood.
Hmm. Absolutely.
All right, which one would you like to go to next, or what do you want to talk about?
Let's see, what options do we have?
We have.
So we got the two ladies in the car. We got the. Let's go to the high key one in the bathroom because I think that's going to give us a lot of challenges. Yeah, especially this one.
Yeah.
So, okay. So just to preface this, I messed up on this shoot. Um, I have no excuse for it. I just messed up. And so there's going to be a lot of correction before we get to the grading portion of it. As you can see here, this is directly from camera, and you're just like, what happens? I thought you knew what you were doing. And, I typically do, but um, like I said, I just messed up here. But this, essentially, I was going after a Wes Anderson Grand Budapest Hotel kind of look, because the building that we were filming in had all these bright lights and really pastel-y kind of colors, and I didn't want to fight that, and so I was like, you know what, let's just lean into it. And especially with what the actors were wearing as far as the colors that they had, it just kind of fits that kind of vibe. And then also it was a kind of a quirky kind of script anyway. You have this woman here who's basically getting fired, and she's trying to find her way or fight her employer, be like, hey, don't fire me. And so as she's doing that, she's oblivious to the fact that she walks into the men's bathroom, and then she finds a man in there relieving himself, and then of course hijinks and craziness ensues. So in this scene, there wasn't really any big thought as far as like the light. It was more so like, how can we just make it look good? Because again, we didn't have a whole lot of lights to play with, and so we had one giant, the fluorescents that are typically in a bath in a building like that. Just gross, ugly fluorescent light. And then we had our own individual lights that we put in there as well. And so you can see it if you look at the tile behind her, you can see our light. That's actually our light, as opposed to the light coming from the overheads. But we kept it because again, it makes sense. You can definitely see it there.
Yeah.
That's one of our lights. And so that's one of those things that we just embraced because again, it made sense because there was a bunch of lights there to begin with, and so it wasn't like, oh my gosh, they put a film light in the background. It was, that's what, it just makes sense.
Right.
But we did that so we can get more illumination on her face because with the position of the light where it was, she was actually mostly in shadow. And again, looking at where her light fell onto that waveform, I was like, she's too underexposed. How can I fix that? So yeah, and again, from a production design standpoint, we couldn't dress this. Obviously, it's a bathroom, and this is where location scouting really comes into play. Because if we had again more time, I would have chosen a different bathroom because I personally don't like those green tiles behind her face. But this is what we had, and so how can we make this look good with the limitations that we have? I feel like that's the question that you ask yourself a lot when you're doing filmmaking. You have this perfect image in your head, and then reality hits.
Right.
It's not always the same thing.
I think I have an opposite opinion. I think the tiles work great because it forces your eye directly onto her face. Right.
Okay.
It's lined up right with her head, which has this kind of like arrow, like this feeling of like arrows pointing towards her. Right.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
my thing on the tiles.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree, but I disagree at the same time.
Yeah. Look like the eye doctor's offers. Oh.
Yeah. I forgot which building we were in, but it was definitely like one of those corporate office like really scary kind of buildings.
Cool. So you said Wes Anderson, one of my
I did.
favorites. One of my favorites. Um,
Nice.
so we'll try to get to that look. We're gonna go through this a little quickly. Um, so for me, the one thing is it's way too bright, in my opinion. So I'm just gonna bring her down a bit, maybe 1.5 stops or 1 1/3, one and a
Cool.
third, and then
Real quick, Derek, I'm
yeah.
sorry. If you guys are leaving comments, I'm not seeing them, so I apologize if I'm missing anything. I'm still having technical difficulties on my end as far as the whole setup goes, but um, yeah, I'll figure it out because I don't know why it's not working.
So will this apply to the whole scene in a video, or is it just for still image? Um, so the program works for video. That's primarily what it is designed for. You can use the same techniques I'm using here for still images, and you can actually edit still images in Resolve. Um, so typically, what we were saying earlier is that some of the power windows and everything, if you have a video, you'd have to have the program track the power windows with the movement of the scene and of the camera. Um, so it works for both, but primarily was designed for video, and this is a colorist has a position in both worlds of still and video. Um, okay, sorry. Where were we? I was going
So
to
you
do
were
something.
saying, yeah, you were saying that this is a little bit bright, so you brought it down 2 stops.
Brought it down. Well, I brought it down a stop and a third, um, and I reduced the contrast by 15%, for right now because I'm going to definitely change it later. Um, I'm going to switch over to another scope here called the vector scope, and this shows me where the color lies within the scene. And you can see if I start shifting this around, the color in the scope will change. So what do we want? You want to go with like a yellow green here, or like a cool green or something?
I'm gonna defer to you. Whatever you think looks appropriate for this scene. Just in terms of the vibe and the feel. Like I said, this is um a very quirky kind of scene because again, she walks into the men's bathroom kind of oblivious to it, and so it should feel, you know, it should feel quirky. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to translate that, but it should just feel quirky.
Okay, quirky. But typically you see like kind of these greenish yellow fluorescence in bathroom, right?
Hmm.
So I'm gonna bring it down to find her skin tone. I'm gonna focus on that first. Um, so I think about there. Ty, you saw her in person. Is this pretty good for her
Can you
skin?
go full screen?
Yeah.
All right, let me pull up a picture of her because it's been literal years since I've seen her. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Because one of the main things that I try to do is I think about the getting the skin tones where I want them, and we have an indicator on the graph that helps you get to that point. So
So to answer your question, she is much warmer than this than what I see here. Let me find a more neutral shot. Give me a second.
okay,
Um,
because it could
so
be
yeah,
just
I say
saturation. What?
yeah. She's definitely more. What's the word? She has a little bit of rosiness to her, but not like she's not like pink or anything.
Okay,
Um, but she is a little warmer than what you have there. Just looking at a couple of pictures back to back.
okay. Um,
That's yeah,
right there.
yeah. There you go.
All right.
That feels more natural for her.
Okay. So I'm gonna leave it there then to get her skin.
Cool.
And then let me switch back. So Wes Anderson, he shoots all of his stuff on 35 millimeter film, which has a film actually has a quite a steep contrast curve to it. So even though we have our film emulation turned on it and it's doing nice things, I like what it's doing. Um,
Absolutely.
the thing I want to do is I want to crush the shadows just a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm gonna bring. Let's see. We don't want to go too high with this. With the highlights, we want to kind of keep those a little muted. Bring out the curve a little strong, little more. So it's not doing much, but it's giving us our. It's doing what I want it to do.
Right.
So let's go ahead and let's add a vignette. We're gonna focus our viewer's eye again on her. It's gonna be kind of a bigger one. Um, let's invert it because what we want to do is we want to subtract from our surroundings and not add to our subject. And while I'm here, I'm going to change the color of our surroundings here. Just kind of pink it up a little bit, I guess, adding some magenta in here. And maybe cooling it down a little bit. One of the other things that I want to do here is I want to make those tiles. I'm going to make them not blue because it's not really living in the palette here. At least that's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's see it.
All right.
And again, going back to color palettes and stuff like that, those are things that the production designer is very involved in, just making sure that all of the colors that are in the scene, they all work together.
Yeah, and a lot of on the lower budget side, you don't really get that chance to do that. But
Hmm.
when you actually do
Yeah,
get a chance to create a color palette and this is what the scene's going to live in, you can really get a beautiful image directly from the camera because of that.
absolutely.
So I'm in the color warper again, and I'm going to change my hue of the from blue, and it's kind of affecting them. If I select both blue and
Yeah, they're
Cyan.
probably more green.
Yeah. You can see the green, like they're changing there.
Yeah.
Um, Let me try. I'm gonna try all three of these here.
Hmm.
And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna desaturate a little bit, then I'm gonna shift them.
Could you just use an eyedropper on that particular color and then warp it that way?
You can, but I generally find that it likes to live in the center. See,
Mm,
I just did that. I can click and drag on that, but all it did was
right.
get the center.
Got you.
So let me reset that.
Interesting.
Um, with different shots, you can do that. Like if I went and got her skin tone, you can see on the color warper where that
Hmm.
little crosshair is going to be. And you can kind of see, well, I'm going to affect that area. And you can kind of get an idea of where you're going to select from. But
Hmm.
typically, what I found is that the colors kind of, unless they're super saturated, they don't really fall towards the edge of the color warper. They're kind of more in the center.
Got you. It's interesting.
So I didn't do much there. Brightened them up. Kind of shifted the color a little bit more towards our magenta hue.
Hmm.
So they kind of. What do you think? Let me go
Can you
full
make it
screen
full
here.
screen?
Okay, that's on,
Hmm.
off, on, off.
I like it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you like it on?
Because it's not as noticeable, I think. Because with it being darker, it makes me look at them more for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as opposed to them being a little brighter until they're kind of matching the same level as that back wall now.
Right. Which that was primarily the reason why I went to them because I didn't live in the scene. They kind of like took us out of it. Because
Right.
we want to focus on her here. Um, I think the last thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna put another power window on her face,
Mm-hmm.
and let's get it to turn. There we go. Let's see what we can do here, because there's just something that's a little too much about it.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if you see that too, but if I just decrease the contrast just a little bit, let's see, 0.87, kind of helps live in our world a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Now, I'm just gonna feather the mask, the power window, a little more, and
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
The only thing I see that is not so Wes Anderson is that the saturation um, doesn't match so much. But do you like the saturation, or should we go more
Well,
stronger?
is that, I mean, we can try it and see how it looks. Because this is all experimental. We're just trying to figure out what's right for the shot. So
Right. So
that's
let's
that's too much.
too
Yeah.
much. Bring it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Where does it feel right to you? Because now we're getting into those small imperceptible changes over the internet.
Okay. Um. So yeah, it's not much. I think it adds right here. Just adds a little bit of
Okay.
a kiss of warmth onto to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go back to our log. We started here. Then we added our transforms into Rec 709.
Yeesh.
Too bright.
Wow.
Let's add our, that's our film emulation here.
Right.
Then we went to exposure and white
Mm-hmm.
balance. Here we added a little more contrast into the scene, kind of separated things more.
Mm-hmm.
Here we toned down the scene to focus on her.
Mm-hmm. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. Here we affected the tiles in the background.
Yep.
And here we did her contrast on her skin, make it a little more nicer for her. And then lastly, we added some saturation back in.
Nice. And this just goes to show you how important it is to film in a format that allows you to make all of these changes. So we didn't say this earlier, but all of these scenes were filmed on the Red Scarlet W, and that films in a raw format, which captures all of the data from the sensor, as opposed to some of the other cameras that compress the data, basically getting rid of stuff, and that takes away a lot of the creative options that you have later on. And obviously you want to get it as close as you know accurately as possible, but having a little bit of wiggle room to adjust and tweak and finesse a little bit, I think is super important, and you lose that when you use some of the lower end cameras. I don't want to say lower end, like they're bad, because they all have a every camera has a use, right? But for applications like this, you're going to really limit yourself if you don't use some of the higher format options that you have available to you.
It's becoming less and less now, though, which is a
Yeah.
great thing for independent film. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the lower price cameras they have a good logarithmic
Mm-hmm.
logarithmic mode on them. You can buy accessories that can get a quote raw image, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think really as long as you don't shoot in a mode that bakes in the color from the camera, if you have that option, um, that's going to be your best way to go. You're gonna need a colorist, or you're gonna need to know how to color it. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, raw is the best. Then which is becoming more and more accessible to people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, because again, it lowers the barriers for a lot of people, because let's face it, filmmaking can be one of the most expensive things in the world, you know, and if you never have the money that you need, should you not be able to create? I feel like that's always the conundrum,
Yeah.
I'd much rather get out there and create something dope and not have $9 billion to be able to do this the way that I really want to, but I still got something done, as opposed to being like, well, I'll never have $9 billion, so I'm not going to create anything. And so, just all I'm saying is, give yourself the most options that you can within the box that you find yourself in. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. That's good advice.
Cool.
We have some other shots from this scene or this film. I'm gonna try to copy paste. Does not work. Okay, never mind. Um,
That's funny.
do you want to go through these, or should we find
I
another
don't.
shot?
Let's find another shot, because they're not that different.
No, they're
Now it's
not.
just a matter of matching. Yeah. So I think one thing that we can talk about is what happens when you underexpose.
Yes.
So we have that night scene with the motorcycle, and or that one. Either way, um, there are two things happening here. So this is from the Power Ranger project that we did a few years ago, and same deal. We maximized the budget where we could, and we had to take away things where we could not. And so in this case, we definitely utilized the lights that were in this location. And so you see, we have the light coming from inside the building that's helping to illuminate the scene. We have that light that's by the stairwell. That's actually one of our lights, just casting that greenish light, because again, this is the Green Ranger, right? And so we put that on there just to um, help the scene a bit. But even still, the camera that I used is not great in low light. We got to blast it with a ton of light in order for the exposure to be right. And so even though my lenses were really fast, I think we were open to a 1.8 on this particular shot. Um, but even with that, we still didn't have enough light so that um, we could see everything. And granted, it is at night, so you're never going to see everything. But when you look at, in this case, the subject of this shot is the motorcycle, until the dude gets on it, it's still severely underexposed. And so what do? that's where we hand it over to Derek and be like, "This is how you fix it. Let's talk about it."
Yeah. All right. So one of the things that we can't have the option of doing is with, like Ty said, is was shot on a red Scarlet W, which shoots RAW. One of the options we have is we can come to the camera RAW tab, and typically I leave this on set to project, which has a global changes to each clip. But I'm gonna change this over to clip, and in ISO, which is how sensitive the sensor is to light, we can go up by one third stop increments. So I'm going to go from 800, which is what it was shot at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to increase it by 2 stops. I'm going to go from 800. A doubling is a stop, so that's 1600, and then the second stop would be 3200. I'm just going to click on that, and I'm going to see what happens. And already we've brought a lot of information back, which is pretty amazing to be able to do that after we've already filmed it on set.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got all that information back. What is it that you would like to see from this, Ty?
So let's talk about the imperfections. Going from 800 to 20, or was that 3200?
3200.
Now we've introduced, yeah. Now we've introduced like a lot of grain and that sort of thing. Uh,
Well,
and
on
is
that
it
note,
good? Is it good? Is it bad? That kind of stuff.
let's go in. Let's take a look. So I'm going to zoom in here. We already have a film grain added, so I'm going to disable that so we can see what
Yes, we can
the
see.
image is.
Yeah.
We can zoom in here to something that's a little darker. We can see on this white stripe here. Ty, this isn't that bad.
Yay!
Yeah,
That makes me smile.
but I'm gonna bring it back down to 800. That's actually not gonna. This is not gonna be easy to show off. Of course, we picked the one shot that's kind of like, oh yeah, it's done pretty well. Um, there. If I turn off the noise reduction, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if you can see the red dots here.
Oh yeah, you can definitely see
Oh yeah.
that.
All right. So I'm gonna take this back down to 800 where it was shot at. This is what the sensor natively sees, which now it's basically pitch black.
Mm-hmm.
Where's a shot here? Here we go. Let's go in here. So you can see the red dots are basically gone from our image. And if I bring that back to 3200, you can see in the separation from the light to dark there's a lot of red, what we call noise. And all that is when we add voltage to the sensor, it creates what do I want to say? You add voltage to the sensor, it creates noise. I don't know how else to say it. Like
Yeah.
there's this like feedback thing that adds this imperfection into the image. With Red, we have noise reduction built into their SDK, which helps out a lot. So if I turn that on, a lot of that went away, which is probably why it looks so good at 3200. 2 stops overexposed.
Which is surprising because I tend to stay away from 3200 when I'm filming with
Right.
that camera.
I can go more dramatic at 6400. Now you can see a difference in the green or is it blue and red channels?
Mm-hmm.
You see that they're coming and going as I click it on and off. You might think, well, I'm going to look at this like pretty small, right? On a iPhone screen or on your laptop. I'm not going to notice that. That might be true, but at some point you're going to want your footage up on a 100-foot screen or a 40-foot screen or something real big, and that little pixel of red noise is now 1.5 feet big, right?
Yeah.
So getting the cleanest image to start with is paramount amongst several other things, but that's probably the biggest thing to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So built into Resolve, we have another noise reduction uh, called temporal noise. And this is great for motion, which video is what we're dealing with, and it uses the mm, computer to do a bunch of calculations to find out what like the pixel in that position versus a pixel in 3 or 4 frames later, and it can extrapolate the differences and manage to suppress the noise throughout the image. Um,
One quick note about that. That's only on the studio version of Resolve, right?
Correct. Sorry, temporal noise is only on the studio version, which is $300 direct from Blackmagic, or if you buy one of their cameras, you get it with the purchase,
Right.
um, which is nice. But I disabled the noise reduction in the raw tab, but let's see how the temporal
Okay.
noise works out here, which it might not because it's a single frame.
Right.
Yeah, it's not gonna work at all on this one. Bad example. But typically, you'd see the blue and red channel noise start to go away. So I'm gonna turn that on. We got rid of a lot of the noise there, which helps.
Hmm.
The
Absolutely.
second part that really helps is if you actually do add a film grain emulation on the back end at the last step, you can blend a lot of the noise from the sensor in with that after you've removed the color noise. Um, so I've got the motorcycle here, which is nice. Um, what is there anything you want to touch more on that?
Yeah, no, I think just, what we kind of spoke about as far as like how to fix those underexposed kind of things. Because, having those clean images, I think are one of those things that people don't really recognize until they see it. It's like, oh, that looks really bad.
Right.
And so I know I had that question for the longest time. Was like, why is my stuff not looking the way that it should? And granted, part of it was I was already underexposing it, but I wasn't, doing that extra step to, try and clean that up a little bit.
Right. And as you've seen in the other shots, when you actually expose brighter, we can bring that down, and a lot of the information is still retained. So that if you shoot brighter, you'll have less noise, a cleaner image, and we can still bring the exposure down in the color step, which
Hmm.
will help you get a better image out of it.
Right. And so it's one of those things where, like in this case, since we are mostly in shadow, we want to expose kind of for those shadows, because the lights are very rarely are ever going to clip when you're shooting a night scene. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It's one of these lights are in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's one of those give and take kind of things because you wouldn't want to overexpose a daytime scene if you're looking at the sun,
Yeah.
that kind of idea because all that information is gone.
Right.
So, these are all just different things. Every single, as you can see, every single shot is different. And so we have to approach it in these different kind of ways and different kind of mindsets to make sure that the overall image looks, looks correct.
Yep. And like you said, every shot's different. This is what it was at when it was shot at 800, and this is 3200, two stops over. And even if you're at the limitations of what you have on set, like if you're just using natural light, um, you can really in the color process you can push it further than you thought you could on set once you get into the some of the advanced tools about noise reduction. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the craziest things is just looking at how much more information is in that particular shot. Because, like, before when we shot at 800, it was nothing but blackness around them, like darkness, and then um, adding the extra stops, in the ISO, the camera saw all of that. It's just wild
Yeah.
that it can retain all that information, even though what we see is not exactly what we get. And that goes to show you that you can't really always trust the monitor on your camera. You
No.
know, it's super important to look at all of the different gauges um, that read the actual signal hitting your sensor, and so uh, always trust those more than what you see on the monitor itself, because the monitor can lie to you. Your
Yes.
eyes can even lie to you, you
Yes.
know, but the scopes are literally an exact reading of what's going on to that sensor. And
The
so,
scopes are considered analog because you're reading the actual frequencies of light. So it's going to be the
mhm,
most accurate you can have.
right. And so if you take nothing from this conversation that we've had tonight, the most important thing is to trust your scopes. If those are wrong, it doesn't matter how much craziness you try and do at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's never going to get, you're never going to, be able to save it completely.
Yep. And it's tougher more and more because people are using the screens on the back of the camera to light
Hmm.
rather than just
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been on a couple of shoots lately where um, the DP was literally just lighting from the monitor, and I'm just like, I want to go over there and like press the monitor because I know how to use it. So I was like, should we go over to false color mode? Should we go over to the waveform mode? I'm like, I don't touch it because that's not my job. But I'm just like, it sucks that I know these things because why are you not using them?
Right. When you see other people
But
making the small mistakes.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, with the time that we have left, is there anything that you want to go through with these last few shots, like between these shots or the more colorful ones, for like the Disney slash Nickelodeon look, like especially like that one I think is super colorful.
Yeah, we can go through that. Um
Cool.
so let's start on this one. This you said this was for like a children's show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was a proof of concept kind of pilot episode, and so the idea was to get the executives over at Disney, Nickelodeon, and what was the last one? I can't remember the last one. Interested in this show, and so we use that as the reference. And so shooting high key was very hard for me, just to be straight up, because I'm very much a moody kind of director and a
Yep.
moody kind of DP. Even um, I just like that look personally, and so making sure that this felt light and airy and um, childlike even was a challenge, and that's one of the reasons why I took this job, was to see what I can do with it. And so we actually had a budget for like a whole lighting team and stuff like that, and so we should have gotten it right. Um, and we even had a DIT on set, which is basically Derek during production versus in post. Um, And so we made sure that we were getting as close to the final image as possible with this. And so hopefully we'll see when Derek gets a hold of it. Hopefully I nailed it. My team nailed it. We'll see.
So I think you did a really great job here, and your team did too. Um,
Awesome.
from what I'm seeing on the waveform here, what we really want to do is we want to keep it lighter. We don't want to keep it below the halfway mark. We want to kind of keep it above that for the majority of what you see on screen. So what I've done here is I've actually increased it by a stop and a half to bring that
Mm,
out.
interesting.
And the second thing
And
I've
it does make a difference. Yeah, that makes a big difference
yeah,
already.
here you are with your dark and moody, and here's the Disney. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, man.
Uh, one
No, but you can see that though. It's funny that you said it because it's definitely built into, just it's ingrained in me. But just making that simple little shift brought it back out of that.
right. The one other thing I've done is I've gotten rid of our film emulation.
Yes.
Typically for a children's show, you don't want to go and try to y recreate film with it because you're not trying to be that moody, like we've been talking about.
Right.
So I got rid of that,
Hmm.
and I've changed the CST, the color space transform at the end here, just to a regular Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, which is typical for television delivery. If this was for Netflix or something, I believe their requirements are 2.4, but also a DCI P3 color space, so it's a lot bigger
Hmm.
than Rec 79.
Right.
And that's a whole nother conversation about color spaces. There's a whole bunch of them.
Man, we could spend like a whole day just talking about that.
Yeah, we definitely could. Um, I'm gonna focus here on her. I'm gonna just create a nice vignette. Typically with children's shows, you don't really have to go too much beyond what was filmed on set. But I'm gonna bring the surrounding elements down around half a stop. Just bring her in a little bit. The one thing I kind of think is happening here is we are too warm. I like where her skin's at, but maybe we do two processes here. Let's cool the whole scene down. I'm looking at our vector scope, and let's get the center, the majority of the center right on. Might be need a little bit of magenta here. There, she's looking pretty good there for her skin. Um, Now in a later step, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to isolate her skin alone. And the one tough part about this is her skin matches the wall. So
Mm.
we're going to have to do another uh, window here, just to get her skin. We're getting too much of that pink, so I'm just going to narrow our hue selection down. Get rid of that pink a little bit. And what we can do is we can use our clean white feature of the qualifier node to kind of gain back what we lost by doing that. And I'm just going to blur it out just a little bit. Just a bit, not much. You can see on her left arm here, we're getting a little bit too much of the background, so I'm just going to shrink it so we kind of blend in here. That's pretty good. I think the thing about this here, I'm gonna go into the log wheels, and I want to warm up the brighter parts of her image. Or her skin. I don't necessarily want
Hmm.
to change the overall midtones. So
Okay.
I'm gonna start lower with our upper ring, and just get the warmness I like in there. There, that's looking pretty good right there.
Hmm.
Um, so now I think it affects a little bit too much to the midtone, so I'm just gonna bring our ring offset here so that our gain, our highlights qualifier, or not qualifier, highlights wheel is just affecting a little less of the midtones. Turn that off and on. Let's bring it full screen. Okay, that's with it on. That's with it off. Off and on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because of internet compression, you may not be able to see those slight details. I personally can't, but I trust your eyes.
It's really tough when you're trying to do a remote session. It's very similar to
Yeah,
um, this style, but yeah, the compression quality over the internet really kind of screws things up. That's why you need to have a colorist you trust on looking at a
absolutely.
reference monitor. And, you know,
Absolutely.
there's not much left here. I might do a kind of a harsher vignette over the whole image. Um,
Okay. One thing that I will say, Derek, just looking at this particular frame, she looks a little pale to me.
okay,
Um, and so if we can bring some of that warmth back into her skin, um, I think that'll be helpful because I like the brightness of it. Um, I like what you did there, but she just looks a little pale and sickly right now.
okay. Let me try that with the saturation here. Maybe that will help pop everything and bring her skin back. Maybe not so much. Let's go back to our skin node. How's that, Ty?
Much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, much better.
Brought her back. Um, yeah. Um, One more thing is the pink and the streamer in the top left here is it's mixing with the purple a little bit. Is there some weird lights behind it? If we go back to let's go back to our Rec 79 image. It's it's in there, but I don't like it. Do you like it?
Yeah. Mm. I think that's just the way that the that particular fabric is.
Okay. Well, maybe we can find a way to make it a little more nicer here. I like this.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, let's make it more prominent. Um, since it is a part of the fabric. I did that on the wrong note. That'll happen a lot.
Yep.
Um, yeah, bring the purple in a little more. Maybe we can lighten it up. Mm, darken it up, maybe. Bringing it darker looks a little better. So, I mean, there's a, I would say Nickelodeon type show.
Absolutely. Yeah. That
Yeah,
already feels, very, very much along the lines of what they do. So, but again, having that foundation is what gets us there. We can't just be like, oh, I shot this with, all the darkness in the world and let's try and brighten it up. At the very least, there was the foundation there to be able to do all the different things. And so, um, it's again important to get as close as you can in camera, even with all of the options of as far as shooting raw and that sort of thing. You still need to get it as close as you can in camera. I'll wear a T-shirt that says that, get it in camera, get it in camera. I'd much rather spend the time on set dialing it in as opposed to having to trying to fix it in post, because fixing it in post is never fun. Adding and like really basically adding all the seasoning. Like if you're making dinner, you know, you got to have all the right seasonings. That's what color grading is, to me anyway. Adding in all the seasoning and all the flavor. But if you start with just boiling water and add seasoning to boiling water, that's terrible. It's not going to taste good, you know. And
yeah.
so you got to have a good, good whatever you're cooking to to start with. And so I love this shot, man. Just to give you some backstory, this is basically the pretty boy of the group, and we had him basically like he loves his hair. Let me rephrase. So the story is being told by Cyrus, who is the other guy that you saw in this particular in this episode, and he is very jealous of this guy. And so whenever he retells a story, he's over dramatic and overselling the fact that he loves his hair and he's like so pretty with the lady, excuse me, with the ladies and that sort of thing. And so we really wanted to highlight that level of jealousy. And so that's why we have him doing this right here. And we put it to Coming to America Soul Glow as he's like, wishing his hair around and all that fun stuff. So it was a fun little scene that we did.
Cool. This one copied over
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens when you have an actual DP knowing what he's doing.
Mm,
I didn't DP this one. I had input, but I definitely had a much better DP and DIT on set with me. And so
nice.
that's the benefit of having a solid team, knowing what they're doing so that they can really focus on the different pieces and making it all cohesive, because every single shot is going to have its own challenges. And so how do you make it all work together um, to make it feel like it's all part of the same show and part of the same episode and all that jazz? And so yeah, I'll swear by it. I'd much rather have a team with me than trying to do everything by myself. I'm not a fan of the solo one man band type of thing. I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons why I hate videography and why I prefer doing this type of stuff, because I prefer working with the team as opposed to doing everything myself,
You need a
because it makes a
team.
difference. Yeah, absolutely. There's too many pieces of the puzzle for one person to successfully do it all. You know,
This is giving me Atlanta vibes right here.
that was one of the references. So yay, that makes me smile.
Yeah, you guys did a great job on this. I think the only thing I'm gonna
Yeah.
do is like reduce the contrast a little bit, gain some back interface.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like to me, it's really like smooth. I really like this. I don't think I would do much more. And you're not gonna like not every shot is gonna need a huge amount of work done to it. You might have some that need a lot and some that don't.
Right.
Like you might have one that just needs an exposure adjustment, another one that might just need a white balance tint, and then that's
Ooh,
it.
that's nice. I like that little vignette. That's dope.
Yeah, it's a little half stop.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, this one makes me smile because I definitely DP'd this one by myself. I had a gaffer with me, and he's phenomenal. Um, but I was definitely doing all the DP stuff in addition to directing for this particular scene. So I'm proud of myself. So I always try and defer to everybody else when it comes to DP. Like I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to stop that. 2024, I'm gonna stop doing that.
Yeah, you need to. And this is looks really nice too. And this one along with this one match really well.
Mm-hmm.
We can go inside. This is a little dark. Let's bring it up by half stop.
Yeah.
That
Cool.
matches more. I don't think you even need to really
Absolutely.
do anything between those two. Maybe I'm seeing like a white balance shift here. See the light on her
Yeah,
is a
I'm
little
seeing.
warm.
Yeah, I see, it especially in her white shirt.
Is that just the coolness probably?
Yeah.
Yeah, not much. Maybe a little hint of green in there. Yeah, those
Yeah.
match up pretty well. I'm seeing like the lady to our right skin tone's a little blue, maybe towards the shadow
Mm-hmm.
area. So I'm just gonna
Yeah.
do a fade here from right to left. Uh, Come on, grab it. There we go. And then I'm gonna kind of counteract what I just did. I'm gonna warm it up just a little.
Cool.
Yeah. So now, like it's barely anything, but it all lives in the same world.
Yeah, man. And I love that you're showing this because again, it shows that the shots don't have to take a whole lot of work to get, good. Um, and so spend your time where you need to. Don't overthink it.
Right.
Um, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds with this stuff. I can tell you there have been so many shots where like on stuff that I've had to color grade because again the budget's not there and I just got to get it done. There have been so many times where I've spent like literal like all day on one shot and I'm just like, why are you doing that? you know, the shot doesn't really need all that. Just white balance it, keep it moving, and get out of there and move on to the next thing. So this has been super super helpful. Yay, it's working. Love it. Um, so this has been super informative, my dude. I appreciate you spending the time with us to really get to see your process and really understand what it takes to go from nothing
Yeah.
to the final. And we've spent what a couple of hours on this, and you can see how in depth it gets. And so, like I said, Derek, I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Most
If I can
welcome.
talk, that'd be great. Cool. So we're gonna end the stream right here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Derek. Can you put your contact information in the chat or something like that?
Yeah.
Especially if you have a film that you want to get graded, this is the dude. Like he's always my first call. Be like, hey Derek, what are you working on? He's like, I got a ton of stuff, but what you got? You know, and so definitely reach out to him if you have anything that you need advice on in terms of even the technical stuff like waveforms or exposure or which camera is best for what I'm trying to shoot, all that kind of stuff. He's definitely a invaluable resource for all of that type of information because I can't tell you how many times I've been like, hey Derek, I don't know what this means, what is it, what are we supposed to do? He's
Right.
like, I got you. So I appreciate you, I appreciate you, I appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ty. I'm sure we're gonna do this again. It was
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
absolutely. So if there's anything that you want to see, let us know because we got a wealth of things that we can show you because this is just one little small little piece of it. So again, let us know in the comments, shoot me a message or whatever. But that is it. I'm good. I'm out.
See you, everyone.